In the past week, I've received some questions about coffee and how coffee activates the flesh, and so I thought I would go ahead and address this in a video. Many of you may not know this, but coffee was actually discovered, first of all, well after Christ was here. Christ did not drink coffee, and it was discovered as an insecticide. It overstimulated the nervous system of insects, various insects, and so farmers were able to use this to protect their crops. Obviously, our nervous system can tolerate more than an insect, but coffee is still a poison. So that's something to think about. The second thing is nothing that you're putting into your body is defiling you. But what is defiling you is what's coming out of your heart. Why are you drinking the coffee? And most people are drinking coffee in order to stimulate their flesh, period. Most people, if not all, are wanting to stimulate their flesh. They're wanting something to wake them up, to give them a sense of power. So this is an issue between you and God. It's not an issue between you and me. This is an issue that you need to be taking up with God. If you're doing all of this work in a day in order to get into the heart and spirit, in order to soothe yourself and calm yourself and get into a space where you can hear and feel God, but then you're drinking a substance that activates your flesh, stimulates your flesh, you need to take that up with God. All I am is the messenger. So here are some of the questions that I received. Is this true for all people? Is it true for all people that coffee activates your flesh or that alcohol activates your flesh? The reason why I'm not equating coffee and alcohol is because wine was something that Jesus drank, but he wasn't overindulging in wine and he wasn't doing it for his flesh. So we have to think about the way that we're partaking in wine, and we also need to think about the fact that Paul told us that if we're partaking incorrectly of the wine and bread of the Lord's Supper, like we're using it to indulge ourselves, we're abusing the Lord's Supper and we're sinning against our own bodies. Okay, so going back to this question, is this true for all people? Yes, all people are affected by caffeine. All people, even if, because I have heard people say, well, I can drink coffee and go to sleep. No, it's still stimulating your nervous system. Well, I like the taste of coffee. There are a lot of things that you could like the taste of. Why coffee? And again, I go back to the position that you need to take this up with God. Same thing with doctors and medicine and all of this other stuff. These are hard things to wrap our hearts around, and it needs to be something that you're taking up with God. It was very difficult for me to quit drinking coffee. I will be very honest about that. I definitely needed to process through the power, the sense of power that I felt in drinking coffee, the way that it stimulated me, the way that it covered up some of my feelings that needed to be processed, the way that I used coffee in order to motivate me. I needed to process through all of that. And those are things that coffee was blocking me from doing. But most importantly, what it was doing is activating my flesh, which fights against the Spirit of God, and then pulling me into the flesh where Satan speaks. These are problematic things. The coffee doesn't defile you. What's in your heart, what you're placing before God, that's what defiles you. Is it possible to still be in the heart and spirit while drinking coffee? Okay, so one of the things that I would say right here, before I even answer this question, is why is it so difficult? This should be a question that you're asking yourself. Why are you so interested in holding on to your coffee? Because you wouldn't be feeling that way about drinking hot water, drinking ginger tea. You'd be like, okay, it's gone. It's done. There's something that this coffee is doing for you. This is a question that needs to be answered between you and God. I'm not going to answer that question. It needs to be a personal relationship between you and God, because you can fight against me all day. But if God answers you, you got to listen. Or at least you have to make a decision about whether you're going to listen and who you love more. Coffee only affects me spiritually if I let it. Does caffeine completely eliminate the possibility for heart and spirit? So that's similar to the question that we just talked about. If coffee only affects you spiritually if you let it, then that's what you're saying. Take it up with God. From personal experience, I don't believe that. What I believe is that it's possible that you think that it's only affecting you spiritually if you let it, but that as you go deeper into relationship with God, this is going to be something that has to go. If you are to be totally circumcised from the sinful flesh and disciplined in your physical flesh, and you're ingesting something that amps up your physical flesh, you're not disciplined in your physical flesh, not to the extent that God has commanded. And so this is going to be a thing that is going to pull you back and try to get the tentacles in of the sinful flesh onto your physical flesh. Inevitably, you're going to notice things like impulsivity. You're going to notice things like fatigue or overactivation. Nothing is supposed to be swaying your physical flesh in that way. You're supposed to be totally disciplined, totally attuned to your body. And this is a chemical, a poison that is pulling you away from attunement. So I don't believe that really for a second. I believe that it's possible that this person believes this, but as they get deeper into their relationship with Christ, they're going to find that this needs to go. I hope that helps. Again, it's got to be something that you're taking up with God. It's a really difficult thing to separate from. I totally get it. I had a lot of difficulty separating from it. I still sometimes want a cup of coffee, but I know the slippery slope. I know that if I have one cup of coffee today, I'm going to want one tomorrow. And then I'm going to justify having increased use. And it's going to kind of numb me out because coffee does have sort of an emotional numbing effect. And while I'm working so hard to be attuned, because you wouldn't caffeine up a little kid, so why would you caffeine up yourself? Don't you realize that when you're caffeining up yourself, that you're caffeining up your inner child? And now you're expecting him or her to behave appropriately? Now you're expecting them to share with you? No, they're numbed out. They're numbed out, they're accelerated, they're drained because their adrenal glands are being drained. There's no possible way for you to drink coffee and not have this affect your body, and then to claim that you are literally disciplined in your body. Thanks for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.